Good morning and welcome to the Global News Show. I'm your host, Alethea Holmes, bringing you the latest updates in global news. The crisis in Ukraine continues. A 4-hour meeting between Secretary of State John Kerry and his Russian counterpart failed to break the tense East-West deadlock over how to proceed on the Ukraine crisis, though both men agreed the situation requires a diplomatic solution. This meeting came hours after a leading Ukrainian military analyst told United States news channels that there are about 50,000 Russian troops within several hours of the two nations' border. But there has been a general decrease in tensions since Russian President Vladimir Putin called President Obama on Friday. However, this supposed decrease in tension has not been noticed by many. Since Putin's speech on Tuesday, March 18th, Ukrainian officials have become increasingly nervous that Putin will try to invade and take over additional parts of Ukraine that have high numbers of Russian residents. Putin claims that Russia will not take other regions after Crimea, but the growing number of Russian troops on the country's border does not ease Ukraine's fear that Putin will continue Russia's invasion. Putin also commented in his speech about America's involvement with the annexation of Crimea. He announced in his speech that their Western partners had crossed the line. He also complained that the leaders in the West, led by the Americans, believe that they've been entrusted by God to decide the fate of other people. These heated comments come in response to the sanctions against Russian officials for the annexation of Crimea signed by President Obama. Here's a short section of Putin's speech.
Would be facing some opposition from the West, but we need to make it clear for ourselves whether we are ready to pursue our national interests in a consistent way, or we will always step aside, as previously. We've heard some threats of sanctions, and they've also hinted at the intensification of some internal problems. Do they want to incite the fifth column, or do they want to worsen living standards in Russia and evoke some protests? We believe that these are statements that are aggressive, and we will respond to it in an appropriate way.
In Kiev, Ukrainian officials said they would never recognize or accept the loss of Crimea. During a visit to Poland and Lithuania, Western leaders, including Vice President Biden, talked about further sanctions against Russia in addition to those already announced. Despite the meetings and the sanctions, most top Ukrainian leaders don't believe it will be enough to deter Putin from continuing to destabilize their country. Putin's reasoning as to why he annexed Crimea stands to make Russian-majority areas believe he is not finished with his invasions. Moscow originally said it was intervening in Crimea because of concerns over the ill treatment of Russians there who make up more than half the population. This reasoning could apply to other regions near the Russian border. If Russia is considering further expansion, additional parts of eastern Ukraine would be high on the list. Attention has also focused on Transnistria, a separatist region of Moldova that has already offered itself to Moscow. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia are also countries with a high Russian-speaking population. Many of the Russian speakers in these areas complain of discrimination, saying strict language laws make it hard to get jobs. Another region of high Russian interest is northern Kazakhstan. This region, similar to Crimea, was once a part of Russia itself. The long-term goals of Putin are unknown, but his short-term actions show that the crisis will not end at Crimea. Thank you for tuning in today for your Global News Update. I'm your host, Alethea Holmes. Welcome back to our Global News Update on the field. I am your host, Alethea Holmes, and I am sitting here with Lee student Kaylee Schwab, and she is also a writer for our university's paper. I noticed that she wrote an article back in March about Ukraine, and we are here to get her input on the subject. Thank you for sitting with me.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. And why did you decide to write on Ukraine?
I think it's really important for Americans to be aware of the situation going there, not only with the people of Ukraine, but also our political ties with Russia and Ukraine as well.
And what was your reaction whenever you found out, after you wrote the article a little while later, that Crimea had actually been annexed and had officially been declared a part of Russia?
Well, at first when I heard about it, it was very daunting because of the fact that so many Ukrainians had spent so much time trying revolting against this power in Western Ukraine, in Kiev. And then when I read more about it and talked to actually a Russian citizen who lives in Cleveland, there's definitely two sides to the coin. Here in America, we have a very Western perspective of it. We think of annexation, and we automatically think of kind of a dictatorial takeover. Russians see it differently. The media in Russia is very different than here in the West. And they didn't see it as an annexation, because annexation is a brutal takeover. They saw it as a succession and something that the Crimean people wanted, because they're very closely tied to Russia.
Mhm. I've also heard and seen a lot of articles about how there are several regions that are close to Russia that are actually hoping to secede into Russia. But I've also heard two sides of the story, that some people say that Putin's administration is purposely feeding these positive messages about them wanting to secede into Russia to make Western countries feel a little more secure about it, instead of wanting to proceed into a war. What's your opinion? Do you think that the countries would want to secede back into Russia if they have a mainly Russian population? Or do you think it might be something that is purposely fed over this direction so that we have a more positive perspective?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a divide within the Ukrainian people. Crimea and a lot of eastern Ukraine is very ethnically Russian. A lot of them are even Russian speakers. And then more of the younger population in Ukraine are very much more Westernly leaning. And so I definitely think there's a divide there, and I do think that Russia does put it in a way where it looks like the Western government is a lot more corrupt than it is. They don't believe it's legitimate at all. And I think that the most important thing is for Ukrainians to have all the facts. Just the other day I read about how there was a group of Russian protesters who took over a news station in eastern Ukraine, and my thing about that is it's okay and it's understandable if Russian speakers and those who are close to Russia want to be closely tied to them, but I think that all the facts should be laid out for them, and they shouldn't be only seeing things through a skewed lens. I think what's important is for us to keep lines of communication open on both sides of Ukrainians.
Mm-hmm. Do you think people on the West, not only the U.S., but other countries, fully understand what the Ukrainian people are going through, as pieces of their country might be going back to Russia, if that's really impacting them? Do you think we could possibly understand how that feels?
I think there's definitely a culture barrier there, because here in America, even though we're separate states and we're very individualistic personally, we are very much a unified country. We are the United States, where in Ukraine, there's definitely a divide between Western Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine. Eastern Ukraine is very ethnically Russian, and a lot of them believe that they should be with Russia. Crimea was a gift actually from the Russian Soviet Union to Ukraine. So a lot of them believe that they are Russian and they deserve to be with Russia. So and with the difference there's definitely a language difference. In Western Ukraine, they often don't even want to hear Russian speakers. And so I definitely think there's a divisiveness with the language barrier. So I think in America, where even though we are individualistic in nature, we don't really understand the community thought that a lot of Ukrainians feel.
And what do you think about the rumors that Vladimir Putin would want to restore the former USSR by invading these different regions and trying to secede them back into Russia?
I don't think that he wants to go as far as that, but I definitely think that Russia feels it's taking back something that belongs to them originally. I don't feel that Russia thinks that it's this brutal force takeover. It's something that a lot of Eastern Ukrainians want. And I think that's where there's definitely a dividing line between Western thought and Eastern thought. So I don't think he wants to go as far as, you know, going back to the full glory of USSR, but I definitely think there's a pride in which he's taking, for taking back what he feels is rightly belongs to Russia.
And what's your opinion about the United States' involvement in this situation, especially President Obama's sanctions against Putin and his administration for their actions?
Well, up to this point, the United States has definitely gone, it hasn't had a very hard stance on it because a lot of the sanctions that we've done have been targeted to people directly involved with Putin, and it hasn't had much effect on the Russian economy as a whole. So I don't think, though we may speak tough, I don't think we've really drawn a hard line in the sand and said what you're doing is wrong. On the other hand, I don't know if we have much pull there. When you look at the United Kingdom, they're very dependent on Russia for energy. And so it's hard for us to sit back here when we're fine, and it wouldn't really affect us if the amount of energy they were given to Ukraine or Europe in general was cut off. But for us to sit back and say, well, you need to change this, it doesn't really do anything when we're not really putting our money where our mouth is.
And do you feel that if Ukraine was given the ability to join with Europeans and actually build their democracy, if they would feel stronger and more backed up in this situation?
I believe that's was the intention when the revolution happened in Kiev. Unfortunately, I don't think enough money and backing has come from Europe in general. I think Russia has put its money out there for Eastern Ukraine, and I think that's why there has been such a pull in the East for them, because they're actually backing up what they're saying with money, saying, we'll help you, we'll give you, because Ukraine is in a crisis right now. They are almost bankrupt. So I think there definitely would be have to be much more money pulled into Ukraine. I think it would be worth it because, I mean, it's a country that could have a great economic effect, positive effect on the world. But yeah, I think there definitely needs to be a stronger stance from Europe.
Well, thank you so much for sitting here and for interviewing with me. I hope that clears things up for you at home watching. Thank you for tuning in to the Global News Update on the Field. I'm Alethea Holmes.